Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new The Hacker Factory podcast with hacker maker Phillip Wylie. You're about to discover what the role of a professional hacker entails, the different specializations it holds, and what it takes to learn and become one. Enjoy the conversation as Phillip and guests unveil the secrets of professional hacking, a mysterious, intriguing, and often misunderstood occupation. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hacker Factory podcast. I'm your host, Phillip Wylie. I call myself the hacker maker because I enjoy helping others get started in offensive security. Anything from pen testers, security researchers, bug bounty hunters, and so forth. And each episode I have someone with a unique story that'll hopefully resonate with you and motivate you in your journey to get into cybersecurity. And so today I have with me Cody Winkler. So thanks for joining, Cody.
Of course. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm very, very honored to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you. And fortunately, we got to meet during a live stream recently, and we'd followed each other on Twitter, but hadn't really communicated. And so that was a good experience. Got to meet you and some other folks that I hadn't talked to before. That's pretty awesome. So
yeah, it's a little difficult for me on streams. I'm not a very I don't want to say like extroverted. I'm just not a very expressive person.
Yeah, everyone's got their style, so that's cool. So yeah, why don't we tell your audience a little bit about yourself?
My name is Cody Winkler. I'm an Air Force veteran, and I've been in the adversarial emulation space for professionally a little over a year and a half, and that kind of means a lot of different things to different people. It's more similar to what many people would consider red teaming, but it's not strictly red teaming in that sense. There's a lot of our focus is testing the organization's ability to detect and respond to threats. And there's a lot of crossover between penetration testing in that space, but there's some more nuance that goes into that. So things like log evasion, testing the efficacy of endpoint detection and antivirus. And when we do engagements, they're very targeted and we have really specific goals. So when we go in doing an engagement, we're not trying to build a big snapshot of what the environment looks like currently. We're more concerned with, what are the more strategic issues facing the organization? What are the risks around the people, the processes, the technology, and we use a lot of adversarial tradecraft to kind of go about doing that assessment.
Very cool. Sounds like a really good way to get the environment secured a little bit quicker, because going through the typical process of pen tests and red team engagements, it takes a while to get things mature and secure. So it sounds like what y'all are doing sounds like a good idea and very interesting.
Yeah, and on the side, I guess on a more personal note, I like doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I like messing around with cars. I got a 5-gallon container of antifreeze in my apartment that needs to get gone soon. So lots of nerdy things happen here.
That's cool, and that's good to show that people trying to get into this, that it's good. While it's good to focus on this area, it's also good to have some things outside of this to focus on too. So how did you get started?
It's a little bit of a weird journey and a little bit painful for me personally. So I'm going to try and keep that side of it kind of on the low. So when I was a teenager, there were not a lot of opportunities for me to explore technology. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, and there just wasn't enough financial resources for that school district to provide access to technology that was relevant at the time for students. So a lot of the learning that I've done over the years has been self-study. Much of it was through the United States Air Force as well, but most of my humble beginnings was through self-study. And the internet was a very different place back then. So it wasn't uncommon to see adversaries and defenders and red teamers and pen testers kind of hanging out in the same communities. Again, the internet was a very different place 10, 15 years ago. But staying on the right path, that was always a key focus for me. Just coming from the background that I did, it would have been very easy to screw up. So the military, I think, is where most of the professional aspects of my knowledge came from.
That's good. Yeah, it looks like all the network experience you had there was, very helpful in what you're doing now. So that's pretty cool. So do you do with this network type stuff? I know a lot of folks will do, server related stuff. So I would imagine that testing routers and switches would be kind of one of your strong points, I would imagine.
Yes. That was a little bit of a weird entry into information security too. So when I was in the United States Air Force, I was doing mostly kind of regular network engineering, network management type work. So configurations of routers and switches, responding to customer events, like outages or problem areas. And it was mostly a troubleshooting-esque kind of role for me while I was in the Air Force. And I really was not about that at the time. I really wanted more hands-on with the security aspects of it. And the military really wasn't able to afford that opportunity to me, which is why I left. And it's really important for people to understand that, because when you start out, you may have one idea of what you think you want to do, and then kind of life happens, and then you end up doing something still good, but maybe not quite what you were expecting.
So did you kind of during your career in the Air Force kind of decided that you wanted to go into security, into the offensive area? Yeah,
it had always been in the back of my mind one day, what if I get out? What am I going to do afterward? And hacking was a very cool hobby of mine, but at the time, that's all it was a hobby. There was no professional strategy to it. There wasn't any knowledge of what the business is even interested in as a result of a penetration test. I had none of that insight until I started working vulnerability management years later. So that's where I would say my actual understanding of the organization's goals came in, was from doing vulnerability management. So I guess if we were to kind of timeline that, right, we went from high school to military, doing those low-level network management, network engineering tests, to kind of network audit support, so remediating audit findings from various different audits, good way to put it. And then from there, just naturally kind of got absorbed into vulnerability management, and from there transitioning into red team.
Yeah, that's a good point for those listening. The vulnerability management teams, I know some companies have like remediation teams. Those are really good. Even the vulnerability scanning teams, those are good ways to eventually get to pivot into offensive security, because you're getting to work in some of those areas, getting to use some scanners. Because I know, like places I've worked before, we've had folks that were, in the network scanning team or the remediation team, that they would basically go back after things were supposed to be remediated, and they were checking to make sure they've been remediated. And some of them end up getting an opportunity to move into the team. So that's something, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good thing for people, areas to know about. I mean, you may not always be able to jump right into pen testing or red teaming right away. So based on what you've done so far, is there anything you would have done different?
I've been asking myself this a lot, and recently too. So on that note, no, I would not have chosen a different path in, because looking back, when I was doing self-study, I had put out content last year about my journey toward achieving the OSCP certification by offensive security. And that was a very painful journey for me because it took me 8 years to pass that certification. And it's not that I didn't have the knowledge required when I was first taking it. It's just I didn't have those organizational insights that really tied the value of that course into a career.
Well, that's pretty interesting. So you had started out 8 years prior to that. That's pretty interesting. I've known some people that's kind of worked on off and on over the years, but that's pretty interesting. So I guess it's kind of good to have that up front, so you kind of have the insight as you went along and what you needed to work on as you work towards that goal. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. So you mentioned some content creation. If you want to share about what you do in that area, that would be cool.
Originally, it started out as just me wanting to put out reviews for the OSCP course, and later on the legacy OSCE certification. So that's what it started out as, and then it transitioned into interviewing my friends from online, getting their insights on how they got into penetration testing or red teaming or any other job within the cybersecurity domain. And then it just kind of spiraled into CW InfoSec. And now I wouldn't say I have a particular goal with it. I'm really maintaining the original goal of, it may sound a little selfish, but it's just there was information that I felt I needed as I was doing self-study that wasn't really available. So things like at the time, we're talking things like labs, publicly available labs that people can use without having to worry about, law enforcement or any other scrupulous things. There wasn't really a whole lot of documentation around adversarial tradecraft at the time. That's gotten much better within the last couple of years. But at the time, it wasn't that easy to find good information. It's not that the information didn't exist. It just finding the good information was a little bit of a challenge. And that's kind of where you can offset that through courses or through higher education.
Yeah, that's good that you bring that up, because and that's one of the good things about it's a lot easier to find good content out there these days. And if you find mentors or people you can work with, that can make it a lot easier. Because when I started taking the OSCP, I started taking it back around May of 2012. And back then you didn't have a lot of resources. You had like Got Milk's blog. There wasn't as many blogs and stuff as there are now. I followed people like Mubix and some of those folks. It was good information, but now you've got so many write-ups that people have done on their experience with the OSCP, and some different people have, like TJ Knoll's list of OSCP like boxes and stuff. So there's a lot of good information out there. Don't mean it's easy, but it definitely makes it a lot easier now, because, if you're on your own and you don't know about this stuff, you can go through and waste a lot of time trying to find good information.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a recent kind of side project that I took on, I would be glad if you saw it. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't, but I had kind of structured the Pwn School project's content into a sort of pseudo syllabus. And that was just kind of a contribution from me to the community. It's not me saying, hey, I work for the Pwn School project. Yeah. This is our syllabus. That's not what it was about. It was, hey, this information is available and it's there. But if you're a newcomer, I can see how it may not be readily apparent, where those talks fall within the methodology. And that's kind of where these weird side projects come from. But that's the kind of stuff that I like to do, because that's the stuff I didn't have when I was doing self-study.
That's great too. And I saw that recently. I appreciate you doing that, putting that up there. And it's just good to have these different resources to curate content, because that's another one in the digital forensics realm. DFIR Diva does a real great job with that. And when you can, go into your site, people can find the Pwn School stuff and other information, which is really good. So based on your experience, getting your OSCP, what would you recommend to someone that's just starting out that wanted to get their OSCP? How would you recommend they do that?
Be prepared for a lot of pain and suffering. That's, but I kind of say that as a joke, but that kind of ties into a little bit of a life philosophy that I've come to grow over the last decade or so. And that's, in my opinion, you really only need one actual skill to make it in information security. And I would contend that skill is resilience, because if you can't handle stressful situations, if you can't handle stressful people, and if you can't handle stressful deadlines, it's going to be very difficult for you to be an efficient pen tester. It's not that you can't be a good pen tester without those qualities. It's just without those qualities, it makes it very difficult to do.
Yeah, and that you mentioned that, a lot of other areas of security too. If you're a defender and something suspicious is going on and you're not able to figure it out quick enough, you got management breathing down your neck. So yeah, it's definitely not a low stress type environment. So
yeah, but on a more tactical, more technologically centric piece of advice, I would say start with that TJ null list. Look at videos of IPSEC doing walkthroughs on boxes from that list, because and I don't want to just say IPSEC. There's many other people that provide that kind of content too. You don't necessarily only have to go to IPSEC. It's just IPSEC is a very, very good source of knowledge in that domain. So that's the only known good that I can think of off the top of my head, is what I'm saying. There's more people that you can learn from, but the fact of the matter is you should really observe how other people are doing it first. So then you kind of understand their thought processes. You understand what goals they're trying to achieve as they're doing these machines, as they're going through the methodology and explaining the different steps that they're taking. That's valuable info. And you might not be able to, I wouldn't say you might not be able to put that together on your own. It might be very difficult, depending on your temperament, putting all of that information together and correlating it in a way that makes sense for you, is what I'm saying. So that's where I would recommend one starts, is watch people do walkthroughs, read walkthroughs. And then once you kind of have that understanding of the methodology, then it's time to start diving deeper into those different aspects of the methodology. So, let's say you know how to run an Nmap scan. Can you produce that same scan output with a different tool? That's good tradecraft, because at some point, and this kind of goes into changing up tactics within the field of red teaming and adversarial emulation, is if you constantly do the same things over and over, that's tradecraft that can be measured. That's tradecraft that can be tracked and associated. So what we want to be able to do is mix that up. So that brings in valuable experience to defenders, but that also brings valuable experience to the organization too, because they might get good at detecting you, but they might miss APT 420, or they might miss some other actual threat actor if you're continually doing the same things over and over. So it's an argument to why you should study the methodology further once you've started observing, once you have a handle on the foundations. Now it's time to dive deeper. So
do you think that people should try to start out maybe in pen testing before they move into adversarial emulation? I mean, I know there's some similarities there, but I know it's I don't know. What do you think? Would you recommend someone start out there, or what do you think?
I don't necessarily think so. I think if you have foundational pen testing skills, I think you can start your career in red teaming if you can match the job record requirements, right? So if you can match those based off of previous experience, and you already have a foundation of pen testing knowledge, I don't know why that would hold somebody back from starting out entry-level red team. I don't know why that wouldn't be the case, but you should ask yourself, Do I have the temperament to take risks? Because there's actions that you can do in a lab. There's actions that you can do in a CTF. And even in some cases, there's actions that you can do in red teaming that you wouldn't be able to do in penetration testing. So that goes a little bit more into scope and goals, but there's enough crossover there to where I don't think it's so significant it would hold somebody back from starting red teaming if that's what they wanted. It's just I would ask oneself, do I have the temperament to take risks being in red teaming? And if the answer is no, pen testing might be more your style. And it's not to say that you can't do cool things on a penetration test. It's just that's a much more detailed process than red teaming, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, and there's a lot of confusion too that I've experienced in my career. People using red teaming interchangeably with pen testing, and it's not really what as when you're getting started out and people may refer to as red teaming when red teaming is more adversary emulation. So just kind of some terminology for the folks listening to keep in mind. So yeah, that's pretty cool that you kind of got to start out in that area, because whenever I was getting started out, there really was, you didn't see as much of the adversarial emulation. It kind of gotten popular over the years, and I think it's a good thing too, because there's too many times that people know the pen test is going on, and I've had friends that have been doing pen tests before, and it wasn't like it was a pen test, so they were supposed to allow the interactions, and you see people sometimes that try to shut you down. Or I've got a buddy that was doing a pen test and he wasn't finished with the pen test, and it wasn't adversary emulation, but he had like some accounts set up, and the blue team went and deleted the accounts and stuff before the test was over.
Yep, that's another thing that you should be aware of if you want to do red teaming. So on one hand, there's a little more forgiveness on penetration tests in terms of evasion. I mean, there's certainly cases that I can see where that might be pertinent to the scope, but that is always pertinent to the scope with red teaming. So it very, very different ideologies, but kind of like what you and I are saying, there is enough crossover there.
Yeah. So what do you think about, have you checked out any of the red team certs like 0 Point Security Rostamouse's course?
Yes. I have a lot of very good things to say about that course. When I took it, it was back on the shared lab environment. So and that was utter chaos. No different from being on public Hack the Box or public CTF. No different than that. People doing weird things, unjoining machines from the domain. No idea why, but yeah, shared labs was my only complaint about that course. Otherwise, it was fantastic. It went over, I would say, the basics, right? Phishing, Active Directory. I mean, these aren't specifically red teaming kind of things, but the very, very key points of interest for us, for sure.
So someone that wants to start out as red teaming, do you think that would be a good option for someone to do instead of going through the OSCP? That's
a little bit of a tough one for me to answer. So if you wanted to kind of summarize the skills between those two courses, I would, and where they would apply within the industry, I would say the OSCP probably applies more toward kind of like boutique, like specialized pen testing. So I wouldn't say like normal, regular, like standard kind of pen testing where you're looking at everything. It very, very much targeted, focused, traditional kind of red teaming. It's just, if you're going in a direction like that, I don't really know if there's a good answer there, but it just kind of depends,
Yeah, I was just curious to get your thoughts. And it's interesting to see that you did eLearn's the ECPPT certification. So you already had your OSCE and OSCP. So what was the motivation for that certification?
That one, that one was a sponsorship from VeteranSec. They are VeteranSec. I don't know if that's still their name. I know they had some troubles with their entity's name in recent times, but VeteranSec on Twitter were the ones that sponsored me for that certification, and that was part of an agreement that I had with them to provide a review of that course for their members. And at the time, I don't want to be harsh on eLearn security. I think when they moved to INE, I think that course got much needed updates compared to the course that I took. The course that I took was, in my opinion, not sufficient for entry-level pen testing, but it was good info. It's just it didn't cover as much as it needed to, particularly in web app vulnerability scanning and exploitation. So they really only covered cross-site scripting and SQL injection at the time, and that was at a really, really high level. But I've heard many great things about that course now that's in INE. I've heard nothing but good things about the materials and how it's been revamped. So I would not take my personal opinion of that course too seriously just because of how much that course has changed since I took it.
Yeah, usually people do that before the OSCP. So that was curious about that. That was just kind of interesting because one of my recommended path used to be is the EJPT and the ECPPT before you mess with the OSCP. Because back when I went through the OSCP, and they've upgraded it and added some stuff since then, but really, if you didn't have any background, it was kind of a tough one to do. You had to do a lot of self-study, and that's why you had great resources like TJ Knoll's list of vulnerable VMs out there, the OSCP-like VMs that you can use to study to prepare, because going in there, you end up, I was doing a lot of research and I was working as a pen tester as I was going through it. So I was actually working on the job. I didn't pass the OSCP the first few times. And just seeing that in the research you had to do to figure some things out because they didn't have a lot of information back then, but they've added. I'd updated, paid for the upgrade a while back and saw the improvements they did. So they're definitely improving. Really seems like the direction they're going. They're doing more to update their courses and stuff too, which is good.
Yeah, and I do like the pricing with their subscription model. The last I saw, it was like $750 a year, and that gives you access to, if I recall, don't quote me on this, but if I recall, all of their courses. Mm-hmm. And the only extra cost after that is just for a certification exam voucher, if I recall, which is a fantastic deal.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I think it's like $750 for the INE content, and they had some specials a while back that was like $400 and something or $500. They had some specials going, so that's one of the things that they have been doing is having some specials on their courses, which is always a good thing. So we're getting down towards the end of the show. Is there anything you'd like to discuss that we haven't talked about?
If I had to give someone, I guess some real advice, if you want to be a penetration tester, or if you want to be a red teamer, or if you want to do weird adversary emulation like I do, the most important piece of advice that I would give you is don't take advice on how to get into those fields from people that are not in those fields or have never been in those fields, because the fact of the matter is they don't know what it's about. There's a little bit of contrition there. There's some very, very skilled defenders. There's some very skilled managers. There are some very skilled employees that absolutely know what penetration testing and red teaming are. But I would err on the side of caution of taking advice seriously from people that are not doing what you want to do. And even beyond that, a lot of times you might find yourself getting in your own way. If you don't want to do that, best way to avoid that is shut your ego down, right? Because I know I personally have a problem with that. So shut the ego down, stay disciplined with learning, because it's easy to get distracted. It's easy for life to come out of nowhere. So if you can maintain discipline with learning, if you can handle stress in a healthy way, and if you can find it within yourself to actually pursue it, which I would say is half the battle, is actually pursuing it. If you can do those three things, you'll be set. And it doesn't necessarily matter what certification you have. It doesn't necessarily matter which previous positions you held. What does matter is if you believe in yourself and you actually learn, that's what actually matters.
That's great advice, and I totally agree with you on taking advice from people that have experience, because one of the things with cybersecurity, with offensive cybersecurity and all that type of stuff, there's a lot of people seeing money signs and trying to jump off that industry. And sometimes you'll hear them describing pen testing or adversarial emulation or something, and it's totally off, or someone be describing pen testing, because one of my friends recently took over teaching at the college where I was at, and he was going through some videos, and there were some video content, and it was like totally way off. Some of the things they were describing aren't real to the industry, and sometimes it's just people talking about what they think it's like, and this is just what they've read, and they haven't done it firsthand. So that's really good advice there.
Yeah, and beyond anything else, you're the only person that's for sure going to be in your corner throughout your entire life. You got to believe in yourself at some point, Yep,
that's good advice.
So, like I said before we started, not a very expressive person,
that's fine.
Very, very simple, very, very simple-minded man. But
well, there's something to be said about short and to the point. That's kind of like when I was writing my book, and that's why I got a co-author, because I was just telling what you need to do, but the publisher wanted almost 200 pages, and I'm not big on fluff, so I totally kind of see your thinking and kind of agree with that myself too. I mean, sometimes you can talk a lot, and sometimes people miss the point when you do that. So there's something to be said about your way of communication.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you joining me. It was great to have you as a guest.
Yes, likewise. And very, very much appreciative of this opportunity. Once again, thank you so much, Phillip.
You're welcome. I'm sure someone's going to love your story. I mean, it's interesting how there's certain shows and not all of them resonate with people. Someone will hear your story, and that's going to be the thing that clicks and helps them. So thanks for sharing your story. And thanks, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you on the next episode.
BugCrowd's award-winning platform combines actionable contextual intelligence with the skill and experience of the world's most elite hackers to help leading organizations identify and fix vulnerabilities, protect customers, and make the digitally connected world a safer place. Learn more at bugcrowd.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Hacker Factory podcast with Phillip Wylie. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.